What happens when the purest moment of a woman's life is tainted by the ultimate betrayal? For Serafina Hayes, the birth of her son should have been a joyous culmination of her whirlwind romance with billionaire heir Alistair Sterling. Instead, while she was in the throes of labor, he committed an unforgivable act of erasure, a calculated strike against her identity and their child's. He secretly changed their baby's last name on the birth certificate, branding him solely as a Sterling. But he underestimated the woman he tried to break. He never imagined that her response wouldn't just be tears, but a single phone call to a lawyer who would not only rewrite a birth certificate, but dismantle an entire billion-dollar empire. This is the story of how one woman's fight for her son's name unearthed a legacy of lies and changed everything. The love story of Serafina Hayes and Alistair Sterling was by all accounts the stuff of modern fairy tales. It began not in a dusty bookstore or a cozy coffee shop, but under the shimmering chandeliers of a Sotheby's auction house in New York City. Serafina, a respected art historian with a modest but impeccable reputation, was there to consult for a small museum. Alistair, whose family name, Sterling, was practically synonymous with old money and corporate power, was there to acquire a Degas sculpture with the casual air of a man buying groceries. He was captivated not by the art, but by the quiet intensity with which she spoke about it. Her passion was a stark contrast to the jaded ennui of the women in his circle. Serafina was different. She had a life, a purpose that existed entirely outside the orbit of his wealth. For her, Alistair was a revelation. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in her world. He didn't just buy her expensive things. He bought the obscure art history books she mentioned offhand, visited the small galleries she loved, and listened, truly listened, when she spoke. The courtship was a blur of private jets to Paris for dinner, front-row seats at Milan Fashion Week, and quiet weekends at the sprawling Sterling estate in the Hamptons. Serafina, who had built her life on her own terms, found herself willingly swept away. She fell in love not with the billionaire, but with the man who made her feel seen. The first cracks in the gilded facade were almost too subtle to notice. They were suggestions offered with a loving smile. "That little museum job of yours, darling, it takes so much of your time. Why not let me take care of you so you can focus on your real passions?" He framed it as an act of love, of liberation. Reluctantly, she agreed, trading her hard-won career for a life of curated leisure. Then came the gentle pruning of her social circle. Her friends, mostly academics and artists, were a little rough around the edges for the Sterling galas. Alistair never forbade her from seeing them, but he would schedule a last-minute trip to Monaco or a vital charity dinner on the same night she had plans, sighing with such believable regret that she felt guilty for even considering her prior engagement. Slowly, her world shrank until it contained only him, the true matriarch of the Sterling dynasty. Sterling was a woman carved from ice. From their first meeting, she appraised Serafina not as a future daughter-in-law, but as a potential acquisition, and one of dubious provenance. Eleanor's civility was a thin, brittle veneer over a chasm of disapproval. She would compliment Serafina's dress while her eyes scanned for the designer label, her smile never quite reaching them. Hayes, Eleanor had once mused aloud over tea, her voice as delicate as the porcelain cup in her hand. An adequate name, sturdy, but it lacks a certain resonance. Don't you think Sterling has weight? It has history. Serafina had laughed it off, but the comment lingered. It was a clear, calculated message: you are not one of us. When Serafina discovered she was pregnant, Alistair's joy seemed to erase all her doubts. He was ecstatic. He held her, his eyes shining with genuine tears, and whispered about legacy, about their son, about the future of the Sterling name. For the first time, Serafina felt she might finally be accepted. The baby was her bridge into the heart of the family. The pregnancy was treated like a state secret. A team of the best doctors was put on a private retainer. A wing of the New York mansion was renovated into a state-of-the-art nursery designed by a celebrity decorator. Serafina's every craving was met, her every discomfort soothed, but she was also isolated. Eleanor insisted on a tranquil environment, which was a euphemism for a luxurious quarantine away from the unnecessary influence of her remaining friends and family. The conversations about the baby's name began. Serafina loved classic gentle names like Oliver or James. Alistair always countered with Sterling family names, Thurston Prescott Sterling III. And the last name, it was a given, or so she thought. "We should hyphenate," Serafina suggested one evening, tracing patterns on her swollen belly. "Hayes Sterling. So he has a piece of both of us." Alistair's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Darling, that's a sweet thought. Very modern, but a name like Sterling, it can't be diluted. It's a brand, a legacy. Hyphenating it is like putting a crack in a diamond." He smoothed it over with a kiss, promising her she was the most important part of that legacy, and she, wanting to believe him, let it go. The day she went into labor, everything changed. It was a long, arduous 18-hour ordeal. Alistair was by her side, holding her hand, whispering encouragement. He was the perfect, doting partner. When their son was finally born, a healthy, screaming miracle, with a tuft of dark hair, the exhaustion and pain melted away into a wave of pure, overwhelming love. They had decided as a compromise on the first name, Arthur, a strong, classic name she loved. "Arthur Sterling?" Alistair murmured, gazing at the baby in her arms. "He looks like a king." Serafina was too tired, too euphoric to argue about the middle name or the last name then. All that mattered was the warm, tiny weight against her chest. A nurse came in with paperwork. "We just need the final confirmation for the birth certificate," the nurse said, her voice cheerful. "The father has already filled out the preliminary details." Alistair took the clipboard. "I've got it, darling. You rest." He scribbled his signature with a flourish and handed it back. Serafina drifted into a hazy, blissful sleep, her baby safe in the bassinet beside her. The next morning, a different nurse came in with the official hospital documents for their records, including a copy of the submitted birth certificate. "Just for you to have, Mrs. Sterling," she said, placing the folder on the bedside table. Alistair had stepped out to take a vital business call. The room was quiet, filled with the soft morning light and the scent of baby powder and congratulatory bouquets that lined every surface. Serafina, feeling more rested, picked up the folder and opened it. Her eyes scanned the document. Mother's name, Serafina Rose Hayes. Father's name, Alistair Prescott Sterling II. And then the line that made the world tilt on its axis. Child's name, Prescott Sterling III. She read it again and again. The blood drained from her face, leaving a cold, clammy dread. Prescott, not Arthur. Prescott Sterling III. Not Hayes Sterling, not even Arthur Sterling. They had erased her chosen name. They had erased her. The baby wasn't their son. He was a Sterling, an asset, a continuation of a brand. Her contribution, the agonizing labor, the 9 months of her life, her very DNA had been relegated to a footnote. Her breath hitched. A single hot tear rolled down her cheek and splashed onto the sterile paper. This wasn't an oversight. This was a coup, executed while she was at her most vulnerable, in a haze of pain and joy. It was a calculated, deliberate act of erasure, signed and sealed by the man who had held her hand and told her he loved her. The gilded cage she had willingly entered had just slammed its door shut, and she realized with chilling certainty that she wasn't a partner in this fairy tale. She was just the vessel. The door to the private suite swished open, and Alistair walked back in a triumphant smile on his face. "Good news, darling. The board is thrilled. Our stock is already up on the news of an heir." He stopped short, his smile faltering as he saw the look on her face. "What is it? Are you in pain? Should I call the nurse?" Serafina held up the birth certificate. Her hand trembled, but her voice was low and dangerously steady. "Prescott Sterling III." Alistair's face shuttered. The charming, concerned partner vanished, replaced by a cool, practiced composure. He didn't even feign surprise. "Ah, you saw that." He set his briefcase down with a soft click. "We can discuss this later, Serafina. You need to rest." "No," she said, her voice gaining strength. "We will discuss this now. You went behind my back, Alistair. While I was in labor, you changed our son's name, a name we never even discussed." "Prescott is a family name," he said, his tone clipped and dismissive. "It was my father's name. It's traditional." "Our agreement was Arthur," she shot back, her heart pounding. "And I wanted my name in there. Hayes. You knew that." "And I told you that was impossible," he said, his voice hardening. "A Sterling is a Sterling. There is no room for dilution. This is about a dynasty, Serafina, not some sentimental gesture. I thought you understood the world you were marrying into." The words "marrying into" hung in the air. They weren't married yet. It was another thing that had been continuously postponed for a more opportune time. Suddenly, the door opened again. This time, it was Eleanor Sterling dressed in a Chanel suit, the color of steel, flanked by a man in a dark suit carrying a briefcase. She glided into the room, her eyes ignoring Serafina and fixing on the baby in the bassinet. "A perfect Sterling heir," Eleanor announced, a thin, satisfied smile on her lips. She finally turned to Serafina. "I see you've been made aware of the correction. I'm glad. It saves us a tedious conversation." The condescension was so profound, it was breathtaking. "Correction," Serafina repeated, incredulous. "You and Alistair conspired to do this." "Conspired is such a dramatic word," Eleanor sighed, waving a dismissive hand. "We simply ensured the proper protocols were followed. My grandson is the future of Sterling Consolidated. His name must reflect that from the moment of his birth. Prescott Sterling III has the right sound, the right permanence." Serafina looked from Eleanor's icy face to Alistair's closed-off expression. The trap was sprung. This had been the plan all along. The romance, the pregnancy, it was all a means to an end, securing the next generation. "I will not accept this," Serafina said, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and grief. "I am his mother. I will go to the records office. I will have this changed." The man in the suit stepped forward. Eleanor gestured toward him. "This is Mr. Davies, our family's legal counsel. Perhaps he can clarify the situation for you." Mr. Davies opened his briefcase. He spoke in a dry, emotionless monotone that made every word feel like a nail being hammered into her coffin. Under New York state law, as the acknowledged father present at the hospital, Mr. Sterling has the legal right to complete the birth certificate. Contesting it would be a long, arduous, and public process, And I assure you, Ms. Hayes, you will not win." He let that sink in. "Furthermore," he continued, "we have prepared an agreement for you to sign, a pre-nuptial agreement, which will become a post-nuptial upon your marriage to Mr. Sterling." He slid a thick document onto her bedside table. "It is extraordinarily generous. It provides you with a substantial trust access to all Sterling properties and a lavish living allowance. It also provides for the child Prescott in a manner befitting his station. All it requires is your full cooperation." "Cooperation," Serafina whispered. "You will make no further attempts to change the boy's name?" Eleanor stated, her voice like cracking ice. "You will not speak of this matter to anyone outside this room. You will perform your duties as the mother of a Sterling. You will be seen at galas, you will smile for the cameras, and you will raise my grandson under our guidance. In return, you will live a life of unimaginable luxury." It was a contract for a gilded cage. They weren't offering her a life. They were offering her a salary for a role, the role of mother. "And if I refuse?" Serafina asked, her chin held high. Eleanor's smile was gone. "If you refuse," she said slowly, "you will leave this hospital with nothing. Mr. Davies will immediately file for full custody on the grounds of your emotional instability. This very outburst will be noted by hospital staff, who are, I should remind you, beneficiaries of our family's philanthropic endeavors. We will paint you as an unstable, unfit gold digger attempting to extort the Sterling family. You will be buried in legal fees. You will never see your son again. Do you understand me?" The threat was absolute, delivered with the serene confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. Serafina looked at her son, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the war being waged over his identity. They would take him. They had the money, the power, the connections to do it. They would erase her from his life as easily as they had erased her name from his birth certificate. Defeated, she slumped back against the pillows. The fight drained out of her, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. She had to play their game. For now. "Fine," she choked out. The next few weeks were a surreal hell. She was discharged from the hospital and escorted back to the Sterling mansion, a place that no longer felt like a home, but a beautiful, inescapable prison. Her phone was upgraded by Alistair, a transparent excuse to give her a new device, scrubbed of her old contacts and likely monitored. The staff were polite but distant, their eyes holding a professional vacancy. She was watched always. Alistair acted as if nothing had happened, as if the hospital confrontation was a figment of her postpartum hormones. He would kiss her cheek, tell her she was a wonderful mother, and then leave for 12-hour workdays. Her life revolved around Prescott. She fed him, she bathed him, she rocked him to sleep, whispering his real name, Arthur, like a secret prayer. Every moment with him was precious, but it was also tainted by the knowledge that she was on a timer. She was a glorified nanny, and Eleanor was the warden. The matriarch would sweep in, offering unsolicited advice, correcting Serafina's common instincts and reminding her of the Sterling way to raise a child. Serafina knew she couldn't live like this. The desperation clawed at her. She had to get out. She had to get her son back. One evening during a lavish dinner party, Alistair Vowell was hosting. Serafina excused herself, feigning a migraine. She went up to the library, a room she knew was rarely used during events. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had one chance. Weeks ago, a young maid, a girl named Sophia from Ecuador, who was new and not yet fully indoctrinated into the Sterling way, had looked at her with an unmistakable flicker of sympathy. Serafina had slipped her a diamond earring and a desperate whispered plea, "Buy me a burner phone, hide it for me." She had found the small package hidden at the back of her lingerie drawer a week later. She had kept it hidden, waiting for the right moment. This was it. In the cavernous, silent library, surrounded by leather-bound books that smelled of money and dust, she pulled the cheap plastic phone from her pocket. She had only one number memorized, one person she knew was outside the Sterling sphere of influence, her old college roommate Chloe, a scrappy investigative journalist who harbored a deep distrust of the 1%. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. It rang twice. "Hello," Chloe's voice was sharp, cautious. "Chloe, it's me, Serafina." There was a stunned silence. "Sarah? Oh my God, where are you? I have been trying to reach you for months. Your old number is disconnected. It's like you fell off the face of the earth." Tears streamed down Serafina's face. "I'm in trouble, Chloe. I'm in serious trouble." Quickly, her voice a frantic whisper, she explained everything. The birth, the name, change, the threats, the gilded prison. Chloe listened without interruption, a string of quiet curses, her only response. When Serafina finished, her friend's voice was grim. "They've got you in a legal bear trap, Sarah. You can't fight the Sterling family with a public defender. They'll eat you alive. You need a shark. No, you need a leviathan." "I don't have any money, Chloe. They control everything." "Leave that to me," Chloe said, her voice filled with a sudden fierce energy. "There's a guy. His name is Julian Croft. He's a legend. He doesn't just win cases. He scorches the earth his opponents stand on. And he has a special history with families like the Sterlings. I'll get a message to him. Stay strong, Sarah. Don't sign anything. We're coming for you." Serafina ended the call, her body trembling with a new emotion, a fragile, terrifying sliver of hope. She erased the call log, hid the phone, and composed herself, wiping the tears from her face. She walked back out into the party, a serene smile plastered on her face, rejoining the world of champagne and empty laughter. She was playing her role. But now she had a secret, a weapon, a name whispered in the dark: Julian Croft. The war had just begun. Julian Croft was not the kind of lawyer you found in a glossy magazine ad. His office wasn't a glass and steel tower in Midtown. It was a discreet, elegant brownstone in the West Village, its only marker a small, burnished brass plaque that simply read, J. M. Croft. He specialized in the impossible, the unwinnable, the cases that required not just legal brilliance, but a certain kind of righteous ruthlessness. He was a tall, lean man in his late 40s, with silvering temples and eyes that seemed to see right through artifice and deceit. He moved with the quiet confidence of a chess grandmaster, always thinking 5 moves ahead. His reputation was mythical in certain circles: the man who brought down a pharmaceutical giant, the man who exposed a corrupt senator, the man who clawed back fortunes for the cheated and dispossessed. And as Chloe had hinted, he had a personal reason to despise the Sterling brand of old money arrogance. Decades ago, Sterling Consolidated, under the leadership of Alistair's grandfather, had hostilely taken over a smaller, innovative tech firm, gutting it for its patents and bankrupting its founder. That founder was Julian Croft's father. The event had shattered his family, and though his father had eventually recovered, Julian never forgot the cold, predatory nature of the Sterling Empire. He had been waiting for a chance to balance the scales ever since. When Chloe's message reached him detailing Serafina's plight, he saw it for what it was: not just a custody battle, but the perfect fulcrum on which to lever the entire Sterling dynasty. He met Serafina in secret. The extraction, as he called it, was planned with military precision. One afternoon, while Eleanor was at a charity luncheon and Alistair was at the office, Serafina followed his instructions. She packed a single bag with essentials for herself and the baby. Then, feigning a sudden illness for Arthur, she refused to call him Prescott. She insisted on taking him to a pediatrician he had never visited before, a name Julian had provided. The Sterling driver was reluctant, but her performance of a panicked mother was flawless. At the clinic, a back exit led to an alley where a nondescript black car was waiting. Julian Croft himself was at the wheel. "Ms. Hayes," he said with a nod as she slid into the back, clutching her son. "Let's begin." He took her to a secure, private apartment he kept for high-risk clients. It was clean, comfortable, and completely anonymous. For the first time in months, Serafina could breathe. "They will be hunting for me," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "Let them," Julian said, calmly setting a file on the table. "Their first move will be aggressive and public. They will file an emergency custody order and paint you as an unstable kidnapper. We will counter it. But we are not going to fight this war on their terms. A custody battle is a sideshow. The main event is the Sterling family itself." His strategy was audacious. "They used a name to erase you," he explained, his eyes glinting. "We're going to use a name to destroy them." He didn't just file a response to their custody claim. He launched a full-scale legal assault. His team, a small elite group of forensic accountants and tenacious investigators, began to dig. They started with a simple, almost frivolous-sounding petition, a legal challenge to the name on the birth certificate, but they coupled it with a motion for discovery demanding access to a wide range of Sterling family and corporate financial documents to prove the material and emotional damages associated with the theft of the child's identity. The Sterling's legal team, led by the pompous Mr. Davies, laughed it off as a desperate, amateurish move. The judge, however, persuaded by Julian's eloquent arguments about parental rights and identity, granted a limited discovery. It was the crack Julian needed. For weeks, Julian's team lived in a war room surrounded by whiteboards and boxes of documents. They traced the labyrinthine network of shell corporations, offshore accounts, and trusts that made up the Sterling Empire. It was a fortress of wealth, designed to be impenetrable. "They're clean," his lead forensic accountant, a woman named Anya, said one night, rubbing her tired eyes. "Too clean. The money moves perfectly. It's like a work of art. No empire is built without sin," Julian murmured, staring at a diagram of the corporate structure. "We're just looking in the wrong century. Go further back, to the beginning, to Alistair's grandfather, Sterling I. This was the part of the investigation that went beyond standard legal practice. Using the leverage of the discovery process, Julian's team dug into archives, property deeds, and incorporation documents from the 1940s and 50s, the period when Sterling Consolidated was founded. Meanwhile, the public battle was raging. The Sterlings had done exactly as Julian predicted. The tabloids were filled with stories of the hysterical gold digger who had abducted the Sterling heir. They leaked photos of Serafina at lavish parties, painting her as a materialistic party girl. Julian countered with a single exclusive interview. He chose Chloe to write it. Serafina, coached by Julian, told her story with quiet dignity and heartbreaking honesty. She didn't sling mud. She spoke of her love for Alistair, her joy at her son's birth, and the profound, soul-crushing betrayal of seeing her child's identity stolen from her. She spoke of being a prisoner in a mansion. The public narrative began to shift. She wasn't a villain, she was a victim. The pressure was mounting on the Sterlings. Their pristine public image was taking a hit. Alistair, enraged and humiliated, tried to reach Serafina, leaving a string of furious, then pleading, then threatening voicemails on her old phone. Eleanor remained silent, a sign. Julian noted that she was truly worried. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. An old, dusty property deed from 1948 for the original factory that started the company. There were two names on the initial partnership agreement. One was Prescott Sterling I. The other was a man named Arthur Vance. Arthur Vance, Julian said, the name tasting strange on his tongue. Who was he? The digital and paper trail for Arthur Vance was thin. He was listed as a co-founder, an engineer, an inventor. But a year after the company's founding, all records of him vanished. Corporate history, rewritten by the Sterlings, claimed he was a junior partner who was bought out early on. But Julian's team couldn't find any record of a payout. They found something else. Instead, a death certificate. Arthur Vance had died in a factory accident less than a year after the company was incorporated. He was unmarried and had no children. His shares, it seemed, were absorbed by his partner, Prescott Sterling. "It's too convenient," Julian said, pacing his office. "A brilliant inventor dies in a mysterious accident, and his partner inherits the entire kingdom. It's the oldest story in the book." He dispatched an investigator to the small Pennsylvania town where the original factory was located. The investigator spent a week talking to old-timers, digging through local newspaper archives, looking for anyone who remembered the accident. He found a retired police officer now in his 90s who had been a rookie on the force back then. The old man's memory was hazy, but he remembered the case. "Never sat right with me," he told the investigator. The official story was a gas leak and explosion. But Vance, he was found at the bottom of a staircase, head injury. It was ruled accidental, but there were whispers. Sterling was a ruthless bastard even back then. He and Vance had been arguing for weeks. Vance accused him of stealing his design. It was a lead, but it was ancient history, circumstantial at best. It wasn't the smoking gun Julian needed. The real bombshell was discovered by Anya, the forensic accountant, as she was cross-referencing old family trusts with Serafina's background. As part of their client intake, Julian's firm had done a full genealogical workup on Serafina. It was standard practice, a way to know everything about their client. Anya burst into his office late one night, her face pale. "Julian, you need to see this. I don't believe it." She laid two documents side by side on his desk. One was a copy of the 1948 partnership agreement between Prescott Sterling and Arthur Vance. The other was Serafina Hayes's family tree. "Look at this," Anya said, her finger tracing a line. "Serafina's maternal grandmother. Her maiden name was Vance. Her older brother, who she rarely spoke of because he died young, was named Arthur." Julian stared at the documents, the pieces of the puzzle snapping into place with a force that took his breath away. It couldn't be. The coincidence was too astronomical. "Run it," he commanded, his voice a low whisper. "Check birth records, census data, everything. I want it confirmed." 2 days later, they had irrefutable proof. The inventor Arthur Vance, the man who had co-founded the company, the man who died in a factory accident, was Serafina Hayes's great-uncle. Julian leaned back in his chair, a slow, cold smile spreading across his face. The Sterlings hadn't just stolen a name from Serafina. They hadn't just tried to steal her son. Their entire fortune, their legacy, their precious resonant name, it was all built on a foundation of theft and blood, a crime committed against her family. Mr. Davies is about to have a very, very bad day, Julian said softly. This isn't a custody case anymore. This is a reclamation. The meeting was not held in a courtroom. Julian Croft understood that the court of public opinion, when properly guided, was far more swift and brutal than any legal judgment. He requested a settlement conference at his office, a choice of venue that was in itself a power play. The West Village brownstone, with its quiet elegance and walls lined with legal texts, was his arena. Alistair and Eleanor Sterling arrived with their lawyer, the perpetually smug Mr. Davies, precisely on time. They radiated an aura of beleaguered royalty, forced to entertain the grievances of a commoner. Eleanor was a pillar of icy couture, her face a mask of bored disdain. Alistair, however, looked frayed at the edges, his tailored suit unable to hide the dark circles under his eyes or the tense set of his jaw. They walked into Julian's conference room, expecting to deliver an ultimatum to finally put an end to this embarrassing affair. They stopped short upon seeing Serafina. She was already seated at the head of the long mahogany table directly opposite the door. She was not the weeping, hysterical woman they had last seen in the hospital, nor the panicked fugitive they had painted in the press. The woman before them was composed, her posture perfect. Dressed in a simple, elegant navy blue dress, she held her son Arthur, sleeping soundly against her shoulder. The sight of him, so calm in his mother's arms, was a silent, powerful rebuke. The fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by a clarity that unnerved them far more than any display of anger. Beside her, Julian Croft stood, watching them, with the placid expression of a predator that knows its prey is already in the trap. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries, Mr. Davies," began his voice booming with false confidence as he placed his alligator skin briefcase on the table. "My clients have been extraordinarily patient with this episode. To resolve this matter quickly and discreetly, they are prepared to make one final, and I must stress, incredibly generous offer." Julian held up a hand, a simple gesture that cut the other lawyer off mid-sentence. "Your offer is irrelevant, Mr. Davies," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying an unnerving weight. "Because you are operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of why you are here. You believe you've come to negotiate the terms of Ms. Hayes' surrender. You are mistaken." He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the Sterling family. "You are here to listen." With deliberate slowness, Julian slid a single thin file across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of Mr. Davies. "You, on the other hand, are here to discuss the history of Sterling Consolidated." Davies let out a short, derisive laugh. "Mr. Croft, I'm not here for a history lesson. This is a simple custody and settlement dispute." He opened the file with a flourish of impatience. Inside was a copy of the 1948 partnership agreement. He scanned it, his brow furrowed in confusion. What is this ancient history? "It has no bearing on—" "Keep reading," Julian commanded softly. The next page was Arthur Vance's death certificate, the cause listed as accidental. The page after that was the sworn notarized affidavit from the retired Pennsylvania police officer, his statement detailing the whispers of foul play, the arguments over stolen designs, and the convenient timing of Vance's demise. A muscle in Eleanor's jaw began to twitch. Alistair shifted in his seat, the color draining from his face. "This is circumstantial nonsense from a senile old man," Davies snapped, slamming the file shut. "A pathetic, transparent smear tactic. You'll be sued for libel, will I? Julian's voice was laced with ice. He slid a second thicker file across the table. Then perhaps this will be of more personal interest. I suggest you open it, Eleanor. He used her first name, a calculated breach of decorum that made her flinch. With trembling hands, her lawyer opened the new file. His face went from flushed pink to a ghastly, bloodless white. Inside was the meticulously documented genealogical report. Birth certificates, census records, family trees, an irrefutable chain of evidence that proved Seraphina Hayes was the great-niece of the late Arthur Vance. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the soft, sleeping breath of the baby. Alistair shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. What is this? This is absurd. It's a trick, a forgery. It is a fact, Mr. Sterling. Julian said, his voice now a blade. A fact your family has built its entire legacy on burying. Your dynasty, your name, your fortune. It was not built by the singular genius of Prescott Sterling. It was built on the patents, the brilliance, and the stolen intellectual property of Arthur Vance, a man your grandfather, in all likelihood, had murdered to acquire it all. Eleanor Sterling finally broke her silence. Lies, she hissed, her voice shaking with a rage so profound it was almost palpable. All of it. Filthy, disgusting lies from a gutter snipe and her shyster lawyer. Then by all means, let's test that theory in court. Julian countered, a predatory smile touching his lips. He leaned back in his chair, addressing the room. Let's proceed to a public trial. We can file a motion to have Arthur Vance's body exhumed. I'm sure a modern forensic pathologist would be fascinated to re-examine that accidental head injury. Imagine the headlines: Eleanor, Sterling founder, a thief and murderer. Think of the depositions, the discovery, every dirty secret, every skeleton in the Sterling closets dragged into the light for the world to see. What do you think that will do to your stock price, to your precious resonant name? The threat hung in the air, a guillotine poised to fall. The Sterlings were trapped. A public fight would annihilate them. The scandal itself was the poison pill. The verdict would be irrelevant. Alistair sank back into his chair, utterly broken. The fight had drained out of him, replaced by the dawning horror of his new reality. He was not the heir to a great legacy. He was the beneficiary of a great crime. He looked at Seraphina, but his gaze was distant, lost. What do you want? Eleanor finally whispered the two words, costing her everything. The question was directed at Julian, the only other power she recognized in the room. But it was Seraphina who answered, her voice ringing with the clarity of truth. She had shifted Arthur in her arms, and now she looked directly at the woman who had threatened to take him from her. I want my son's name back, she stated, each word precise and deliberate. His legal name, the one that will be on his corrected birth certificate, will be Arthur Hayes Vance. The Sterling name and the blood and lies it represents will not touch him. Eleanor gasped, as if struck. Impossible. He is a Sterling. He is a Vance. Seraphina corrected, her voice hardening. And he is a Hayes. He comes from a line of creators and survivors, not predators and thieves. That is his legacy, not yours. Julian stepped in to delineate the rest of the terms, his voice cold and methodical. First, the birth certificate. You will sign all necessary documents to have it amended today with your full and uncontested cooperation. Second, he continued the reclamation. You stole a company from the Vance family. You will now give it back. You will establish an irrevocable trust in the name of Arthur Hayes Vance, into which you will transfer 51% of the voting shares of Sterling Consolidated. Majority control. The trust will be managed by an independent trustee of my choosing until Arthur comes of age. Davies sputtered, finding his voice. 51%. That's control of the entire company. It's theft. It is justice, Julian stated flatly, and it is non-negotiable. He turned his gaze to Eleanor. Third, you threatened Ms. Hayes that she would never see her son again. Now, that promise comes back to you. You will have no contact with the child. None. You will not see him, speak to him, or send him so much as a birthday card. You tried to erase his mother. For that you forfeit the right to be his grandmother. Alistair Sheem finally looked up, his eyes swimming with desperate unshed tears. Sarah, please, he croaked. He is my son too. Don't do this. For the first time since they had entered the room, Serafina looked at him, and he saw not rage, but a profound and sorrowful pity that was far worse. You had a son. Alistair, she said softly, her voice breaking with the ghost of the love she once felt. His name was Arthur, and you traded him for an heir named Prescott. You made your choice in that hospital room. This is you, living with it. Her words were a final, devastating blow. One last thing, Julian added, delivering the coup de grace. The final term is the public restoration of a name. You will issue a formal public apology. Not for murder, of course, I'm not a fool, but you will announce that in a comprehensive review of the company's history, you have discovered the foundational and previously uncredited contributions of co-founder Arthur Vance. You will announce the formation of a multi-million-dollar charitable foundation in his name, funded by the Sterling family as a gesture of historical correction. You will restore his name to its rightful place in history. It was complete and total humiliation, wrapped in the language of corporate responsibility. They were being forced to dismantle their own myth, to rewrite their own history, and to hand over the keys to their kingdom. There was no negotiation. There was only the grim acceptance of utter defeat. Mr. Davies, pale and sweating, began drawing up the settlement papers. Eleanor Sterling sat ramrod straight, a statue of crumbling pride. Alistair stared blankly at the polished table, a man already a ghost. The signing was a somber, silent affair. The scratch of their pens was the sound of an empire ending. When it was done, Serafina rose, adjusted her son in her arms, and walked out of the room without a backward glance. She stepped out of the brownstone and into the bright afternoon sunlight, a free woman. In her arms, she held not an heir to a tainted fortune, but the beginning of a new honest legacy built on the names of the family they had tried and failed to erase. Victory was not a ticker-tape parade. It was the quiet click of a key in the lock of a sun-drenched brownstone in Brooklyn, a world away from the oppressive grandeur of the Sterling mansion. Serafina had used a small fraction of the personal settlement Julian had insisted upon, separate from the monumental trust for her son, to buy a home. It was a place with bookshelves that reached the ceiling, a small overgrown garden in the back, and rooms filled not with priceless, untouchable artifacts, but with light laughter and the lingering scent of her friend Chloe's terrible baking. Life after the reckoning was a study in contrasts. The world of the Sterlings imploded, while hers began to bloom. The carefully crafted press release about correcting a historical oversight had been a 9-day wonder in the business pages. The Wall Street Journal and Forbes ran speculative pieces, hinting at the seismic power shift within Sterling Consolidated. The society pages, however, were far more brutal. The story behind the story, whispered over cocktails at galas and charity balls was one of ultimate humiliation. The Sterling name, once a synonym for power, was now inextricably linked with scandal and defeat. Eleanor Sterling became a ghost. The iron-willed matriarch, who had once commanded boardrooms and terrified debutantes, vanished from public life. Her gilded cage, the Fifth Avenue mansion, became her self-imposed prison. The staff reported that she spent her days in the drawing room, staring at portraits of her late husband and father, surrounded by the trappings of a dynasty that now felt like a mausoleum. She had fought for a legacy, and in her victory, had she succeeded, she would have erased a woman. In her defeat, she had been erased herself, relegated to a bitter footnote in the story of her own family's downfall. The silence from her was absolute, a final impotent display of pride. Alistair's decline was more public and more pathetic. Stripped of his future role as CEO and reduced to a minority shareholder with no real power, he became a man without purpose. He was a fixture in the city's most expensive bars, his charm curdling into a boorish desperation. Tabloids that once heralded his engagement to Serafina now ran blurry photos of him stumbling out of clubs at 4 a.m. He tried to contact Serafina, the angry voicemails and threatening texts giving way to rambling drunken pleas for forgiveness, for a photo of Arthur, for a scrap of the life he had so carelessly thrown away. Serafina listened to none of them. Julian had them blocked, but the reports of Alistair's unraveling reached her through Chloe. She felt no triumph, only a deep, aching sadness for the man she thought she loved, a man who had been so hollowed out by his own legacy that there was nothing left when it was taken away. Serafina's new life was defined by purpose. She was now, by proxy, the most powerful force in a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Julian had helped her appoint the trustee for Arthur's 51% share, a formidable no-nonsense woman named Grace Lynn, who had a reputation for corporate ethics and a spine of steel. Serafina's role was not to run the company day to day, but to serve as its moral compass. She held a permanent seat on the board, not as an executive, but as the representative of the Arthur Hayes Vance Trust. Her first board meeting was a trial by fire. The room was filled with old guard Sterling loyalists, men in bespoke suits who looked at her with thinly veiled contempt. They saw her as a usurper, a gold digger who had lucked into power. The acting CEO, a Sterling crony named Marcus Thorne, presented a new business proposal, a plan to acquire a series of smaller companies in developing nations, a classic Sterling move of aggressive expansion. He spoke of efficiency, of profit margins, of shareholder value. When he was finished, all eyes turned to Serafina. The silence was heavy with expectation. She wasn't an MBA. She wasn't a titan of industry. She was an art historian. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice quiet, but carrying across the cavernous boardroom. "Your presentation is very thorough on the financial benefits, but I see nothing about the human cost." She opened a folder. "I took the liberty of researching the 3 primary companies you wish to acquire. One has a documented history of using child labor. Another has been fined twice for egregious environmental violations. The third is known for its brutal union-busting tactics. Is this the kind of shareholder value we wish to create?" Thorne was flustered. "These are minor operational issues, Ms. Hayes, things that can be cleaned up post-acquisition." "They are not minor issues to the people they affect," Serafina countered. "Sterling Consolidated's new mission statement, the one we issued in the name of historical correction, speaks of integrity and ethical responsibility. We cannot honor the legacy of Arthur Vance by engaging in the very predatory practices that defined the old Sterling Empire. The proposal is rejected. Grace Lynn, the trustee, spoke for the first time. The trust votes with Ms. Hayes, she said, her voice final. The motion was dead. A quiet gasp went through the room. The old guard looked at Serafina with a new expression, not contempt, but fear. They realized she was not a figurehead. She was the power. Her other great project was the Arthur Vance Foundation. With a hefty endowment from the Sterling family, as stipulated in the settlement, she turned it into a major force for good. It provided grants to struggling young artists, funded scholarships for engineering students from underprivileged backgrounds, and invested in clean technology startups. She was giving back the fortune that was stolen from her family, using it to build the kind of world her great-uncle the innovator might have wanted. She found an old, faded photograph of him in her grandmother's belongings. He was a young man, with kind eyes and a hopeful smile, standing in front of a workshop. She had it framed and placed it on the mantel in her Brooklyn home. Sometimes she would stand with Arthur in her arms, point to the picture, and tell him the story. "That's your great-great-uncle Arthur Vance," she would whisper. "He was a brilliant inventor. He wanted to build amazing things, and this," she would say, her voice thick with emotion as she gestured around their warm, happy home. "This is his legacy. This is what he built, through you." Her relationship with Julian Croft deepened into a strong, supportive friendship. He was her trusted advisor, her legal guardian angel, and a frequent guest for dinner. He would watch her with Arthur, a quiet respect in his eyes. He had taken her case for revenge against the Sterlings, but in helping her, he had found a measure of peace for his own family's history. He had not only balanced the scales, he had helped create something good from the wreckage. One crisp autumn evening, as Arthur slept upstairs, Serafina and Julian sat in her garden, a glass of wine in hand. The city hummed around them, a distant, gentle melody. "Are you happy, Serafina?" Julian asked. She thought for a moment, watching the wind rustle the leaves. "I'm not the person I was," she said. "That girl who fell in love at Sotheby's. She was naive. She wanted a fairy tale. But fairy tales aren't real. What I have now, it's real, it's purpose, it's peace. It's the freedom to protect my son and build a life that is honest. So yes, Julian, I'm happy." She had walked through the fire of betrayal and emerged not burned but forged. The ashes of the Sterling Empire had become the fertile ground for her new beginning. She had lost a false love, but found her true self. And she had given her son the greatest gift of all, a name that was not a brand, but a story of truth, resilience, and reclamation. Serafina's story is a powerful testament to the fact that true strength isn't always loud. It's in the quiet resilience of a mother's love, the unwavering pursuit of truth, and the courage to stand up to immense power, not with force, but with facts. The Sterlings believed their name was a weapon and a shield, but they learned it was a brand built on a lie. By trying to erase Serafina, they handed her the very key to their undoing, proving that legacy isn't about what you own, but what you build, and whose shoulders you stand upon. Her victory wasn't just for herself, but for the great uncle she never knew, reclaiming a family history that was stolen long ago. If you were moved by Serafina's incredible fight for justice and identity, please give this video a like to show your support. Share this story with anyone who needs a reminder that the truth is the most powerful weapon of all. And don't forget to subscribe for more compelling stories of drama resilience and ultimate vindication. What did you think of the Sterling's ultimate downfall? Let us know in the comments below.